Very nice.
Pertwee, Pertwee.
Oh, very nice. I'm resident of Collinwood for YouTube, Joel Sage, joined by my buddy Gordon Dymowski and my buddy Patrick McCray. We're here to talk episode 2 of The Prisoner, starring Patrick McGowan. He also wrote some episodes and was executive producer of this series, the creator of the series as well.
Mhm.
So, guys, I'm gonna let
Okay,
you guys.
before proceed, Joel, I have a question.
Sure.
Last time we talked, Patrick had suggested that you do the McGoohan order. You know, you do those first four, you do the rest, and then you do like the last two or three. What second episode did you watch?
I watched The Chimes of Big Ben.
Okay.
So, what? So here's I watched. Well, really, I watched the whole series. So after we did the first episode, I just went ahead and watched the rest of the series. And so I rewatched the Chimes of Big Ben today. So after I watched that, where am I going after that one?
Well, let me ask you, how well do you remember Free for All?
Very well, actually.
Jewel, I know that you're a man of structure and planning.
Yes.
But if there's any way we could persuade you, and I think Gordon would agree with me, to maybe shift the conversation to Free for All.
Oh, yes.
And save Chimes of Big Ben for the third last.
Okay, so here's what we'll do. Because I love impromptu as well. I love suggestions from any of my guests, especially you guys. Let's do Free for All right now. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll let you guys start first. Gordon, go ahead.
Well, Free for All is one of my personal favorite episodes of The Prisoner for a couple of reasons. One is that I grew up, when I was growing up, my dad was involved in Chicago politics, like hardcore daily machine politics. But he was like basically an errand boy, for lack of a better term. So I always loved the fact that Free for All is kind of it's not just an examination of like, oh yeah, elections are worthless, but it's also a little bit more about, okay, you've got this guy who's just shown up. How do we get him to kind of feel okay with sharing why he resigned? Well, we'll make him part of the power structure. And then, and there's some very, very, really some cutting scenes and some great lines. Especially when asked, number 6 is saying less work, more play. So I think it's a much better second episode than Once Upon a Time. I'd rather put Once Upon a Time towards the end, because that is because you've got the same person playing number 2.
Man.
Yeah, Liam McCurn. It just makes sense there.
Yeah, Once Upon a Time has to be towards the end. So
right.
You're talking Chimes of Big Ben.
Right, Chimes of Big Ben.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Patrick.
I agree. You see a totally different character in an episode like Free for All or Free for All or Checkmate or something like that than you do at the end. Someone agrees. He is confident. He has sort of a sense of Zen resignation in Chimes of Big Ben about, what's going on. There's really very little that they can do to throw him. Even only, so here I am talking about Chimes of Big Ben. So I got to stop. In Free for All, sure, let's seduce him into following the power structure. Let's make him think if he can't escape, he can be part of maybe everyone escaping and really play up his ego and all of his hero fantasies. And what you're dealing with in Free for All is the process of wearing him down. But the problem with wearing down number 6 is that it's a very Buddhist story, because he will go beyond the point of really desiring to escape. Yeah, he wants to escape, but the desire to punish the village and so on and so forth. I think they break him so hard that he becomes completely detached, and that's an interesting place for him to be.
I'll say this about this episode, that because number 6, Patrick McGowan's character, he plays so much there's so much range the actor has. So when he's playing number 6, and you go from all the episodes that we saw before Free for All, and what they had done to him and things he's done to them too. He has done as much as they've screwed with him, he screwed with them right back. And so with receipts, often in wrestling, there's going to be, how do I put this? You knew there was going to be something that happened to him. And when the series ended the way it did, by the way, too, I'm like, I wasn't really shocked, because the best way to sort of leave an audience guessing is wondered, well, what's next? What really happened?
Like the ending of Alf.
Yeah. Because that's the thing, like him like there's a point where he fights with, in the one episode, he fights with the guy who played number 2 twice. There's where he ends up poisoned. The guy gets poisoned, but he's also, and it's like, I'm not, and you guys told me that guy had returned a second time. You guys had told me that in the first video. So when I watched that episode and then the last one right after it, I'm thinking, I sort of get why he returned, because he really was he's the first real one that was most determined to break number 6. And so it made sense to bring back Leo. And
now,
really,
Gordon, what do you ascribe the poetic significance, the return of Leo McCurn?
I think, in looking at that particular arc, Chimes of Big Ben, Once Upon a Time, and Fallout, he is, the first time he basically says, there's no such thing as sides. It's all one big world global conspiracy. And he basically, I think, was someone who wanted to make sure that he pleased his masters. So Once Upon a Time, it's like, you know what? Okay, I did this, but I got to absolutely break him. And McCurn's number 2 is basically, he's like, I can do this. And so he decides to do this thing about, basically it's really intense psychotherapy. And I think the other thing, and then Fallout, we kind of know he's brought back to be put on trial. I think part of it is that McCurn is kind of an opposing presence to McGowan, because McGowan is kind of like very, very on the line, very hard-edged, very angry. And like McCurn is like the kind of guy you could meet at a pub and have a few drinks with. And I think there's that kind of nice, really great tension. The only other number 2 that has played it twice is Colin Gordon. And those 2 episodes kind of form a little arc, because the general, he's like, he's not even concerned with number 2. He's like, okay, I've got this computer that speed teaches people. Number 6 destroys it. And then A, B, and C, it's basically, you can see his superior saying, no, you need to fix this, and putting the pressure on him, because in the general, he's like, he's very kind of regal and very, very calm, but like A, B, and C, he's drinking milk, he's very nervous. So I think McCurn provides a kind of nice, I hate to say amiable, but he's able to do it in a way that isn't McGowan's, I'm not going to break, you're not going to break me, you're not going to break me. And I think McKern starts with kind of the, oh yeah, I'm friendly, but I will go and I will, because McKern is kind of turns into really the most intense number two, where during the filming of Once Upon a Time, McGowan nearly killed the guy, and he ended up having like I think a heart attack or a nervous breakdown or something like that. So.
Good, Pat.
I wonder if that happened on Baby Secret of the Lost Legend. I hope so. I hope McGowan was like that everywhere. Yeah. McKern is this great. He's just as determined, but he manages to be so in a life-loving way. I think he's convinced himself to keep such a wonderfully good humor that it masks his own pain. Because you can't have as much joy as he expresses in Fallout without the release of such incredible pain. And so he's been holding back a lot. And I think, one's thin, one's portly, one's slightly younger or looks younger, one's slightly older or looks older. They're just this wonderful study in opposites. And there's a part of me that wonders if McKern's number two was, which sounds like a cologne, McKern's number two was the last number six. Or if he was, maybe the first number six. If number six is what is a code name they give to the most difficult prisoners.
Yeah, because here's the thing too. There's so many throughout the series. For anybody who's never watched it, there's a lot of the people whoever runs the village. There's a lot of plants, a lot of spies, if you will, who work for them, and it's tough to determine who is and who isn't.
It's everyone.
Yeah, right. McGowan just long before Stone Cold Steve Austin applied the words "Don't trust anyone," Patrick McGowan perfected it. With number six. I mean, he really did. That's sort of who he reminds me of throughout the series is Stone Cold Steve Austin. Is he just does not trust anybody. And he has no reason, and really he has no reason to, and he has every reason to not trust anyone. And it's like, for example, when he goes, there's an episode where he actually gets off the island. You guys know this. And because when he wakes up in the village, no one's around. So he gets off the village and goes home. And just to be brought back. And because I love how they switch the pilot on him, BC, and I'm like, oh shit. But I know that's not the episode we're talking about, but still, with Free for All, with the whole trial thing, it made you just go, here's a guy who's basically it made you feel like Russia. Like they're gonna fight the trial's just for show. The trial's just for entertainment.
I think you're thinking of Fallout, not Free for All. Free for All's the election one.
Sorry, Fallout. Sorry, wrong one. My bad. With the election, it's like they're not gonna really let him win, and then just them turning on, like them going number six, then they're chanting number two at him, and it's like, dude, you're being played. But they're playing a game with him that he sort of played in an earlier episode prior to Freefall, where I forget what episode it is. He receipts them in doing something. I forget what it is exactly. But he sort of gets rid of a number two very personally. Patrick McGowan's character does. Number six does. And I believe it's prior to Free for All. It's prior to the whole election process. I'll have to go back through the series again. But with this episode, the election, him being, oh, you can run. yeah, you can run. but it's on our terms, it's on our rules, it's on our policy. It's basically you can run, but you're not really going to get elected. We're going to make you think you're going to get elected.
Welcome to Chicago politics.
And the most symbolic moment in all of this is where he gets to the controls. You're free to go, you're free.
Yeah.
That's this one, right? Yeah. And, it doesn't work. They don't want to. Of course.
Yeah, and basically what they're doing too is by having him be number 2, they're basically trying to show him, hey, they're here by choice. Basically, they're trying to give him the middle finger without actually showing the middle finger. Which is psychologically is great when you do that, because it's like, well, now you have these people who, well, hey, you're in charge now. Hey, you're free. You're free. No, we're here. We're not going nowhere. It's really, I'll say this is, from a psychology standpoint, it's more psychological than anything I've ever seen in the 80s, and that's saying something.
And Joel, did you say in the 80s?
Yeah, in the 80s.
Okay.
Because you got to understand, like, I know a lot of people look at Hellraiser as just blood and gore, but there's a lot of psychology to those movies.
Sure.
Just involving the puzzle box itself and the creation of it, because the devil created it. And then the whole Hell Priest concept. And when you get into the other things that, for example, the movie Dead Zone, okay, there's a lot of psychology in all the movies we'll ever watch, or the movies you will watch, or shows. But with this, I dare say The Prisoner set its own psychology that would be used time and time again. It addresses communism. It addresses dictatorship. It addresses politics several times in the series. And it addresses where somebody will take away your rights whenever they damn well feel like it. And you have to fight for who you are. And that's basically, I watched Patrick McGowan's interview where he was with those college students, and he was talking about this, how he had to get into the building, he had to run through all these things. And he said, it's about oppression too. And it was a really good conversation he had with all of them. Go ahead, guys. I'm rambling.
Oh, yeah. I mean, is it a matter of having your rights taken away, or is it a matter of just having the illusion of rights dangled in front of you briefly? And, McGowan, of course, I dare say is a tremendous hypocrite, because he's talking about all of this, oppressive, identity-stealing, authoritarian bureaucracy as a Catholic, so strict, he won't do a love scene with a woman. And so McGowan has this on-running blind spot. I won't call it hypocrisy, but blind spot, that he has seated himself in the most authoritarian bureaucracy he possibly can, monitoring you. You have to confess, etc. And yet he's trying to blame everything else. So again, I think he's without knowing it, talking somewhat about this power structure he can't escape from.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that with I also think with McGowan, there's also an element of kind of personal. At the time, he was in a series called Danger Man, and he was actually asked to play James Bond twice, and he turned it down. So I think a lot of it isn't just that, oh, I'm a Catholic, and he has that blind spot. But I think a lot of it is just, I'm not going to do what you want me to. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to follow my own lead. And at some point, I mean, one of the interesting things is that in Times of Big Ben, some of the rear shots where he's walking with the Russian agent, that's his daughter, which is really creepy.
Oh, I thought it was a stuntman.
Well, there might have been like one or two others who were stuntman, but no, it was his daughter, which is yeah. Sorry, folks, I have to be honest.
Really?
Because he did not even want to be like, putting his arm around a woman or being, because he thought, oh, it's TV is too permissive, da 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 da, and it's like, you don't necessarily, if you're an actor, you may have some leeway in terms of what you can do and what you can't do. But sometimes if you're doing a script and you may not want to do like a full romantic scene, but if you're going to do that where you're doing everything you can to avoid the appearance of like impropriety, it just feels it feels like you've got a guy who, I mean, basically the whole story is he was given money, he, go produce this. And so I think what you see is a guy with an ego who can't listen and can't really understand that, like, when you're putting together a project, sometimes you don't always get your way. I mean, every movie, play, any piece of art is collaborative by nature. I mean, imagine if on Dark Shadows, Jonathan Frid insisted that, like, every other scene, he needed a close-up, regardless of the plot.
They'd been calling him William Shatner.
Right.
Now, with this episode, what did you guys make of it, them, from a psychological standpoint, them basically, hey, oh, you could run, but just what they do to him is sinister as hell.
Well, I mean, I think psychologically, I think the biggest thing is not to make him think, you actually don't have any power, but to make him ashamed of himself that he fell for it in the first place. I think.
Yeah, and I think too, because it makes sense for Free for All to be second, because the whole point is the number 2 that asks him to run, he's basically doing that for his own freedom. Because the real number 2 is that French maid who doesn't really speak English until the last few moments. Spoilers, people. And I think there's a lot of, it's basically the village is saying, not only are you a prisoner, but if you think you're going to have some kind of freedom, we're going to pull it away from you. And it becomes very duplicitous. It's like Checkmate, if you think about it. The whole episode is a chess game between McGowan and Peter Wingard. And there's this element of number 2's kind of being, it's not let's strap number 6 to a table and torture him. It's how do we get him to admit why he resigned without necessarily causing him harm. And in many episodes, we see that has very, it has very dire consequences where you've got some are like, okay, well, we're going to just, one is, okay, well, we're going to punish you. We're just going to ostracize you. Another is, number 2, there's a woman who dies, and number 6 says, you know what, I'm going to kick your ass. And just keep, so he does this whole, like, okay, that's where you see number 2 kind of think, you kind of think number 6 could be a really good number 2, because he basically he gaslights number 2, for lack of a better term. He buys all sorts of records and
hammer into anvil.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Is this your favorite? What's your favorite episode of The Prisoner? Is it this? Is it Free for All?
Well, it's not Free for All. Free for All is an important episode, but in terms of just, boy, you have episodes that are very satisfying, And you have episodes, even if they have an unsatisfying ending for number 6, they're just in the irony department, and they all have unhappy endings for number 6. What am I saying? Or the episodes that are just fun to watch. Hammer and Anvil is fun to watch. The Girl Who Was Death is incredible fun to watch. I would say for me, the convergence of fun to watch and significant and et cetera, for me is probably Once Upon a Time.
Yeah, it's my favorite too, simply because I think it's just two people in a room having a battle of wills, and I personally think that should have been the final episode of The Prisoner. Forget Fallout. Like, okay, just make it 16. You end with number 6. I mean, David Shore would have killed for an ending like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Once Upon a Time, it sort of somewhat feels like the end of a series too.
Well, I think it was intended to be.
Yeah.
Gordon, am I right about that? He kind of thought he was wrapping it up there, and the people
because he had his 7, and then it went from, okay, we need 22. Well, no, we can't do 22. Let's do 17. And he goes to Lou Grade, his financer, and Lou is like, Sir Lou Grade is like, hey, do you have an ending for the show? And McGowan's like, nope. And so McGowan, took a lot of drugs, drank a lot, was tripping balls for 48 hours, and wrote Fallout. And Lou Grade was like, you know what? I'm going to work with that Selby guy on Dark Shadows and a movie about raising the Titanic.
He's the Titanic, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Early ad for Viagra.
Mm-hmm.
If Patrick McGowan could have gotten away with just doing 7 episodes of The Prisoner, do you think it turns out a lot differently?
Not differently, but it has less filler.
Yeah.
Every episode counts. And, when you think about it, we keep talking about the McGowan 7, but if McGowan intended Once Upon a Time to be the last episode, then it's an even more perfect number.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's 6.
Mm-hmm.
And that fits a series, a British series, and it's symbolically so important because it's number 6. And interesting that in number 2, he gets to be number 2. I don't think he's beyond kind of ham-fisted ironies like that. God bless him. But that may just be me.
Now, he wrote some episodes not under his own name, but under different names.
All sorts of names. Yeah.
Why was that?
I think he wanted to conceal what a egomaniacally driven project it was. I don't know. Gordon, what do you think?
I think part of it was probably it might have been British Writer Union rules, for all I know. I know that like one of his writing names was Joseph Surf, which is like a big kind of huge bad symbolism. I also think too it's I think that way I'm sure that he was getting bugged by ATV about, hey, you need more writers. You can't do all this. He said, no. I've got this surf guy doing this. He directed. He wrote and directed Free for All. He directed under the name Patty Fitz. So
was it part of his mother's name or something? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, there are episodes he does direct under his own name, but it's just like, okay. Free for All, I do like the episode because it builds a lot of psychology, and that's something this series continues to do with each episode, including like, even though the ending of the series is very, very intense and interesting and a bit weird. Just a bit.
Jewel, Patrick McGowan was tripping balls when he wrote it. How can it be anything but weird?
Do we have confirmation on that?
Well, Listen, did I ever mention to you that one of my favorite Halloween movies is Halloween Resurrection? Okay. Um, oh my god. Which isn't a weird movie, but still. I understand sort of why they ended it the way they ended it. I guess he was really tripping though. He was on drugs.
Well, he did like to drink, so he probably, at the very least, he was, pounding away the Jägermeister or whatever the British equivalent of Jägermeister was back then, and typing away.
What's your favorite Patrick McGoohan movie that he's in?
One movie.
Yes.
Escape from Alcatraz.
Scanners.
Oh, yeah, I forgot Scanners. Yeah, Scanners. Okay.
And on that note, I did a little side trip because I watched all of McGoohan's appearances on Columbo, because he did, I think, 2 in the 70s. He directed a third, but didn't appear. And then he did 2 in the 80s. So the first was By Dawn's Early Light. And this is kind of related to some comments you made, Patrick. Dawn's Early Light, he plays a military commander with, he's a commander of like a boys' school, military academy, where it's discovered that he was engaged in some less than noble pursuits. There is Identity Crisis, which is really about probably the most prisoner, where he plays a spy who also plays like his a foreign informant. And it's funny too. There's this great moment where Columbo is visiting McGoohan, and Columbo's like, "Hey," and McGoohan is playing music, and Falk is saying, "Hey, this music is familiar." Why, yes, it's Madame Butterfly. Yes, it is. You bugged my apartment. I know. In the 80s, he did. I forget. There's one. He also directed Last Something for the Commodore. I'm forgetting the full title. But in the 80s, he did. Actually, I forget the title, but he plays a political figure, like a political fixer who is trying to help. There was an issue where he had to cover up a crime, and so a reporter finds out, and so he kills him. And then there's Ashes to Ashes, where he plays a corrupt undertaker who's a failed actor, and his victim is Rue McClanahan. And there is this theme in his Columbo appearances about a guy who has a secret, who does not want it to be found out. And it's not like number 6 where he's like, I will not break. He plays more of a cat and mouse game. So I do think, Patrick, you said last time about, there might be something more going on with McGoohan. And I think that may be on a symbolic level, because I think he directed Ashes to Ashes as well. So I do think he seems to have a predilection for that kind of people who have secrets, who don't want to be found out. He was also in Ice Station Zebra, which is Howard Hughes' favorite movie.
A great movie.
Yeah, it was Ice Station Zebra where he found the location for the prisoner, right?
Yeah, he left for a few months to film that. And so they filmed Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling, because number 6 ends up in somebody else's body. And we find out about his romantic life.
Mm.
I like that episode. I know I'm not supposed to, but I do.
Overall, what did you guys think of the episode Free For All?
It's one of my favorites. It's one of those that I get a little bit more of a personal charge from it, because it's just my background, the fact that I grew up with, dirty and nasty Chicago politics in the background. It doesn't just do the, elections are fixed or they're rigged. It talks about the psychology of how do we select a candidate And it's happened in other elections, um, like uh, a few years ago, Speaker of the House Mike Madigan. He was running because I was living in this district, and basically he had two people who ran against him, but the understanding was they're going to lose because he's going to get it, and it makes it look like there's more of a competitive race than there really is. So I think Free for All is kind of one of those. It's an episode that I find a lot of richness in. It may not be one of the fact that it's one of the McGowan Seven, I think, is critical, but it's one of those where I kind of get a little bit more of a charge out of it. It's kind of like Hammer into Anvil. Maybe it's not everyone else's favorite, but I love that simply because I like the kind of, okay, two strong wills are going to fight.
Yeah, for me, I wish I had more of that personal connection to it. For me, it's an episode that starts out very strong with a really, really, really good concept, and I find myself getting a little bored at a certain point. And it could just be that after you've seen one or two Prisoner episodes, you know where this is going. You know, it's like, I get it. And it ends very strongly, but I think its second act pads it just narratively for me a little bit. I now, if you were watching the show for the first time, and if this was the second episode you were seeing, I think that's a very different experience. And that's how it's supposed to be seen.
I like how in Free for All he's vote number 2.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's full of irony.
Like, even though like the series is very serious, there are just some funny moments. It's like, I'm like, really, you're all in on this, huh, buddy? Or vote number 6. But it was, I found that humorous to me. It's like, you really don't think that after everything they've done to you so far, you don't think they're just like setting you up here, buddy?
They tell him.
Yeah.
You know, don't lie to him very much in this one.
No, they don't.
He ends up lying to himself. And that's the sad moments, are the moments where you kind of begin to see him buying into it just a little bit.
Yeah.
And you know he's setting himself up for a fall. And it's one thing for the village to do it. It's another thing for the village just to give him rope upon rope upon rope and say, good luck.
Yeah. Okay, guys, what's the next episode you want to pick?
Gordon, what is number 3? It's not Checkmate, is it? You got, okay, so you got this, and then at the other end you got Fallout and
you got Fallout, Once Upon a Time, Chimes of Big Ben, Arrival, Free for All, and then I know there's one before.
There's Checkmate and Dance of the Dead.
Dance of the Dead, I think, comes next.
Is it Dance of the Dead or is it Checkmate? Which is the one where he really? Because Dance of the Dead for me is kind of a good one to have going into Once Upon a Time, because he's just symbolically, he's dead, he's unpersoned, or because he's still figuring stuff out in Checkmate. But I'm open to other interpretations. I don't remember which one comes next.
Let's do Checkmate, because I think from a psychological perspective, I think it does a lot more in terms of expanding the stakes of what number 6 is going through. I mean, if Arrival is, we want to know what you're doing, we want to know why you resigned. Number 2 is, okay, we're going to seduce you, and then we hope once you're part of the power structure, you'll just say, oh yeah, here's why I resigned. And then Checkmate is more like, okay, we're going to play a little cat and mouse game. I'm going to play a chess game simply because since you're not being straightforward, we have to do that. So you see kind of the gears kind of twisting.
Well, and I think he still has some optimism in Checkmate. This is still a problem he can figure out.
Right.
And it's when he just can't figure out that one either, you know, who's a prisoner, who's a warden, that he symbolically just has to die. that is the complete loss of self that Dance of the Dead is about.
So we'll do Checkmate next. When's the next day available for you guys?
You tell me.
Yep, same here. Usually Thursday nights are not very good, but otherwise I'm flexible.
Is Friday good?
Friday is good.
Friday's
Okay,
good.
so Friday 10:30 we'll do Checkmate for The Prisoner. Guys, thank you for bearing with me.
Joel, thank you for being flexible with us on this too.
No, I mean, I wasn't expecting you guys to change it up on the episode, but it's cool. I like that because here's the thing too. What I liked about Free For All is the fact that you're right. He does believe that it will work. The one thing you don't ever want to do, there's two things you don't want to do: lie to others, but before you can't lie to others, you can't lie to yourself. And when you begin to lie to yourself, you can be deceived. So, and that's sort of the message of the episode too, which is really good. If you guys have not checked out The Prisoner yet, it's free on Tubi. These two fine gentlemen recommended it to me, and it is a solid show to watch. I enjoy. I have not, by the way, guys, I have not checked out the reboot. I've stick to the recommendation.
Yeah, don't check out the 2009 reboot. Don't Joel. Trust me, you'll thank us later. You will thank us later.
What 2009 reboot?
About okay, yeah. Listen, people, Joel is a very smart man.
I can't be what I want to be.
Although sometimes he has to remember to keep his edibles separate from his gummy bears.
Oh shit! Oh god, that was good. That was good. Gordon, you got to be excited about the Bears trading back in the draft and getting a wide receiver from Carolina, man.
Well, I gave up on the Bears years ago.
Really?
Wow. Yeah, after the Super Bowl, they just went, ew. I'm a Bulls man. I'm a basketball man.
Michael Jordan. But yeah, guys, I'll see you Friday night. Links to the Dark Shadows Daybook of Battle will be in the description box, and links to Gordon's Amazon page will be in the description box. Guys, thank you both so much.
Absolutely, Joel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, guys.
Good night.